came down to Frankston in 2009 or the end of 2008. I'd been coaxed down here by a mate, Matt Burns, to come and do a pre-season. I'd spent the last couple of years at Rosebud. In 2007 I played in a premiership and then came up here and didn't have a really successful year in my first year. I dislocated my shoulder and had to have a second shoulder reconstruction on my right shoulder. I then came back again in 2010 when a lot of people had left and played the next 3 years here, 2010 through to 2012. Played a large portion of the seasons, and then I decided at the end of 2012 that I wanted to head off overseas and go travelling. So I moved to Mornington for 7 games in 2013 and then headed overseas for the European summer and was away for 6 months. Came back and I've played the last 2 seasons at Mornington, which I really enjoyed. Probably describe myself as an unorthodox footballer. I probably wasn't gifted with natural ability. One thing that I've always prided myself on is my attack at the contest. I think that I put my head over the prune most times, or all times I hope. Yeah, that's probably the main thing I rate myself on as a footballer, is that if anyone remembers me as a player, was that I was hard at the contest and yeah, was a fierce competitor. So I came down in 2009, just after Shannon Grant had been appointed as a coach. When I got here, I was pretty impressed by the drills and the way that training ran. Unfortunately, throughout the course of the pre-season, I injured myself, and I was pretty disappointed because I just signed and was looking forward to trying to crack into the senior side, and yeah, I ended up having a season-ending injury, and Shannon was good enough to invite me up into the box along with Craig Black and Wiggy and a few other guys to get a bit of a different perspective on the game. I know that during that time there were a lot of people who didn't agree with the way that Shannon Grant coached, but from my perspective, I did learn a lot from him. He does have a really sound footy brain, and just having that experience or different perspective to view footy at this level was pretty beneficial. I thought that it probably helped me develop as a player and as a person, and my ability to communicate and work with other people. I was pretty thankful that although I missed 2009, I was able to stay involved at the club, and everyone got around me and supported me during that time, because anyone who's been injured in the long term knows that it's not really great, and you want to stay actively involved and you want to be a part of things, even though physically you can't be. So yeah, as I said, from my perspective, I learned a lot that year, and yeah, I'm pretty thankful for it. So in 2010, the Goose was appointed as coach. I was probably fortunate enough to have played against Simon previously, once when I was a young fellow at Rosebud and he was at Mornington, and then again when he was at Dramana and I was at Rosebud. I had a different perspective on Goose, as anyone who's played against him knows that he wasn't that well liked on the field, and there's no doubt he was a tremendous player. He even ragdolled me, I think, when I was a young fella for chirping up a little bit too much, but it's no great feat if you had seen me when I was younger, so it's pretty lightly framed. But then we flash forward to 2010, and yeah, I think that I built a pretty sound rapport with Simon. I enjoyed my time here under him. At times, we would have discussions or animated discussions or differences of opinion, but it was always for the best. And I think that if he had an issue with something that I did, I think he was probably more vocal with it, because I was a little bit older than some of the other guys. So I used to cop it a little bit from him, but I think ultimately it probably made me a better player. Yeah, and I enjoyed the time here with Simon, and again, he taught me a lot about footy. He taught me a lot about being a leader, and I'm really thankful for that. And what he's done during his time here, he held the group together when, there was a huge exodus of people for whatever reason. He poured his heart and his soul into the club, and, should be commended on that effort. Although we weren't as successful as we would like to have been, I can't doubt that we weren't competitive. In all the games that I think back to, if things had gone differently, we probably would have won a few more, and we lost a lot of games by small margins, and Simon had an ability to wring the best out of people in whatever way that was required. For me, it was probably riding me pretty hard, and for other guys, that's the way that he operated with them. But for other people, he was very nurturing and supported them really well. But again, ultimately, I think he helped get the most out of me as a footballer and out of my peers. So thanks, Simon. Yeah, so I suppose every time that I come back and see the rooms, I get a little bit nostalgic, and I also probably feel a little bit regretful that I went overseas in 2013 and that I didn't hang around. I would have liked to have played, officially over 50 games and all of that, but every time I come back here, it's great to see, the club tends to be going in the right direction. There's better facilities, there's, great personnel here, there's always going to be talent. But I think, like every time I come back, probably the thing I miss the most is I don't get to see the guys that I played with as frequently. As I said, I built some really great relationships, and if everyone had hung around, I would have probably not gone overseas. I would have stayed around for another year or two. And that's when I come back here. One of the other things that I feel is I'm proud that I played at a state league level, and and more importantly, that I'm proud that I met some really good people and have built some really good relationships, and I was lucky enough to play footy doing that, and I got to play on some pretty amazing surfaces. Getting to play at Skilled Stadium and Visy Park and those type of places, it's a little bit surreal. And getting to play against guys who their full-time job is a professional athlete, when there's the majority of people here are either students or work full-time. It's pretty gratifying when you do get a win over those guys, because it just displays that the talent gap isn't probably as great as everyone thinks it is, and that if given the resources and time, there's no reason that we wouldn't be able to win more games on a consistent basis if we had the same training loads. And that's probably what I think about the most when I come back, is that if this was a full-time establishment, what's the potential that we could have achieved. That's probably one thing that I think of a little bit. But as I said, I'm just really thankful and grateful for the friendships that I built, and my time here. I don't have any regrets, even being injured, etc. Like, you can't change those things, but I wouldn't want to change them. Made me a better person, a more resilient person. So in 2009, when I came down and didn't actually get to play, it gave me a good perspective to see some of the talent that was already on display here. Like Neil Winterton was always someone that I really enjoyed watching playing footy. I think the first time I came down and watched the Dolphins game in 2005 or 2006, I watched him and Mick Ablett, and I thought they were the best players I'd ever seen. And watched guys like Rigger and a few of the other older guys. I didn't really get to play with them in 2009 as I was injured and things, but I did definitely look up to them as players. Polly as well. Flash forward to the next year, when there was a fairly different personnel here. I was really fortunate to play with Hibbo in that stellar year that he had. Obviously Hawks as well, kept getting better every year that he played here. Baggers had, a couple of stellar years here, which led to him to get drafted. Lee Kitchen, although we only played, a short period together, I really rated him highly. Lukey Potts and Boz as well. I rated those guys really highly, and also PK. I thought he was a tremendous player with really strong leadership style, and skills. And there's probably a heap of other guys that I could name, but during that time there was a high turnover of players, and I think if we had kept everyone at Frankston at that time, we probably would have been far more successful, because if you look at the percentage of guys who have been drafted as mature age recruits from VFL clubs or state league clubs, a large proportion of them started or had some time at the Frankston Footy Club. So obviously playing at this level, you come across a lot of guys on the AFL list, although that I found that the guy I probably had the most consistent battles with was James Wall, who played at Casey and then went on to play at Willie. Pretty similar player to myself in terms of build and the position that he played. I remember the first practice game that I played out at Casey against him. I just gave him way too much latitude in the first quarter, and he proceeded to take about 8 grabs and have about 10 touches. So he taught me a little bit about how I had to go about things. He was a really good player, and I found that every time that we sort of played against each other, that as much as it was a competition between teams, I always used to try and make sure that I had the better hand on the day, regardless of the result with him. Another guy, Ben Davies, who played at Willie, he was a really hard-running wingman. I used to get swung around a little bit, so I played in a range of positions. I played on Fev for a brief point when we played out at Casey. Luckily, I didn't have to play on him when he kicked his bag of 10. Sorry, Campo. Also, Brad Fisher here, when he kicked 10. Again, that was on Campo, so tough day at the office there for Daniel. But yeah, as I said, my highlight was every week you knew you were going to come up against someone who was a quality footballer, because they wouldn't be at that level unless they were a really good footballer. And just I prided myself on really making sure that every week that I did my utmost to beat my opponent. And there's a great bunch of players floating around at state league level at all clubs, including Frankston. And I feel lucky that I got to play at a high standard against some really great opposition. And obviously the day that we played Ben Cousins here in a pretty loaded Coburg side, that's a pretty special memory, where Benny Lean kicked that goal on the 50 arc with not much time to go. Was pretty awesome, and I feel pretty privileged that I got to play against Relton Roberts, the Barunga Bullet. So I have some really solid memories of playing against some pretty good opposition. Well, this year I was fortunate enough to get married in April. I invited a lot of guys that I played footy with here, that I built really sound friendships with, like Boz and Hawks, and I invited Baggers, but he was playing, so he couldn't come. Nick Bateman, Dave Barton, all guys and Jolly Miller, and all guys that I really developed a strong friendship with and still catch up with pretty regularly. It's the best thing about Frankston, as much as it is a professional sporting body as well. It's like a great big local footy club, where the relationships and bonds that you form are really tight and strong. You spend a lot of time together with everyone. You develop really close relationships and good rapport with people, and chances are when people leave as well, they tend to gravitate towards playing footy with guys that they've played with here, because Frankston's a pretty special place where everyone develops really good relationships, and everyone who's been here tends to relate well to one another, whether they were here at the same time or not. So I feel pretty fortunate that I was lucky enough to play here and be involved at the club for 4 or 5 years, where, as I said, it probably made me a richer person, where I got to meet and make some lifelong friends, and I'm pretty thankful and humble about it. So probably one of my crowning achievements at Frankston during my time was the nickname of the Whis that I gave to Benny Crowe. He's a man of many nicknames, but that's personally one of my favourite ones. As he alluded to in his interview, the reason behind it was that it was a bit of a cold night he didn't flush out the details as well as he could have. It was a cold night, and as everyone does at the end of a cold night, wants to get into the showers, and we noticed that his appendage resembled an upside down umpire's whistle, and thus the nickname the Whis was born. And then, when Crowe was coaching Seaford this year, it was great to see that the name had held on, and then when he was trying to give out awards, all of the players at Seaford were, yelling out Whis. So it was, I was pretty happy about that. One of my greatest memories here as well was probably the social aspect of the footy club. As I said before, it's like a really great big local footy club, and when the boys have a Saturday night off together, we all like to stick together and head out on the Terps. And I think back to my time here, events like having Keg Day and that type of thing at Hox's place, they were some pretty special memories. And there's some pretty funny stuff that took place whenever there was a large collection of us together. That's one of the things that I probably miss the most as well, is watching the first year guys get tormented about their abilities to drink and things like that. But it was never nasty or malicious. It was all in really good fun, and everyone looked after each other, and I think it helped build stronger bonds, through some pretty tough times. But as I said, the social aspect was definitely one of my highlights here. Yeah, definitely. When I first came to Frankston, I got the full experience of the Frankston Hill, having been injured. To hear some of their witty remarks on the sideline is pretty comical. For Smythe, who sounds like he's been eating gravel, to keep spitting out put downs to players, and to see people like Cameron Cloak get so offended by it that they start having a go at him over the fence is pretty comical. And adds on the bongos, it just adds to the atmosphere and the spectacle it is when people come down and play footy here. I was lucky enough a couple of times to have my name chanted as you run onto the ground, and it's a pretty special experience. There's nothing quite like it, and as I said, I really enjoyed my time here, and every time that I do come and watch, I make sure that I position myself on the hill so that I can hear some of the banter that happens there, because it's pretty special. So I'm currently still playing at Mornington. I live in Mornington. It's I don't live far from the ground. I enjoy playing at Mornington. It's a club that my dad played at. So a bit of a family connection there. There's also a lot of guys that I grew up with who now play at Mornington. Dale Whelan and a few other guys. So that's a really exciting thing. I enjoy the little bit more relaxed atmosphere of local footy now. As playing here, it is pretty intense. The relaxed atmosphere probably suits me where I'm at in my lifestyle at the moment. Like, I've got my first child's due in January, and it's sort of it suits the lifestyle that I'm at now. And I've got a playing assistant coach role there at the moment, and once my family life gets sorted, I could probably definitely see myself progressing down that pathway as a coach. I'm pretty passionate about footy. I think that in order to stay sane, I'll have to be involved in some capacity. Whether it's coaching or just work that I do at school with kids in footy. But definitely I think that's probably a pathway that I'll go down at some point in the future, whether it's coaching a local senior side or my kids' footy teams or whatever. I think that I'll probably be actively involved in footy for a long time still to come.